Hi guys, what I have here is a tailgate from our Land Rover Defender. Now this is an aftermarket tailgate. I've never covered one of these before. Now I'm going to wrap this in leather so it matches the cab door card. So the first job I need to do with this door card is to make a pattern. Now I'm going to pattern the body first, the main part, the flat area, and then I'll pattern this, potentially the other things, but potentially not. I'm going to use some double-sided seaming tape. I've now got the plastic onto the card. I now need to draw on the plastic around all these shapes and the outer edge of the card. So that fits nicely. I now need to pattern this bit here. I've now got this part here wrapped in the patterning plastic. It's about as flat as I can get it. Obviously we've got these little bits here that are extra on the plastic. These are where the seam is going to be, so I need to mark in the perimeter of the shape and then mark in the seams. Because we've got a radius on all these sides, the seam will be finished somewhere up here where the high spot of both radiuses meet. You understand what I mean? There, where it meets. So if you notice that from this point here it starts to come in, but it'll come in on both sides of this. So I'm going to draw around the outside first. I'll take this off, and because I hope this is symmetrical, I can fold it in half. So you see the shape of the seam, how it curves a little bit here. If I ever make a symmetrical pattern, I always split it in half and put a C and a C. That just means that's the centre of the pattern. And there we go. That's what that seam will look like. So it wraps around that nicely. It's going to need a bit of stretching in here, because you'll always end up with a few little wrinkles, but stretching it will just pull them out. Can now remove that. The pattern is now on the leather. I'm going to put in the centre line. This pattern needs adding to here, so it's plus 1 inch there and plus there. So I need to add 1 inch to the edge of this, some to there. It's a measurement where it's going to get cut off anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but I don't want too much. And we have a seam allowance here and a seam allowance here. What I will do with this, I will draw around the pattern. I want a visible stitch line that I can stitch through. So if you ever have to be really precise with where your stitch line is, it's always better to draw it in. So I'm going to draw that one in. And the same with this. These seams are like darts almost, and it's very critical where they finish, where this point comes to. So having the stitch line drawn on is best practice really. Then you can finish your stitch in exactly the right place. So add my sum to here. That's 1 inch. That's about 1 inch. Always better to add more than not enough. If I have to add something onto a pattern, especially with leather, I will always add more than I need. It's better to actually cut a little bit extra than to have to cut this again because you haven't cut enough, and wasting leather is quite expensive. So this was just a little plus, same at the bottom, marking where the pattern ends and starts, and that's it. And I'm going to put where the end of these are, because it's quite critical on this pattern. So mark on as much information you can on the leather, and then you won't have any problems when you come to sew it together, glue it together or whatever. You know exactly what you're doing because you've got reference marks of where things start and finish. When it comes to sewing, the same. Where you start and finish is quite critical on a lot of jobs, so marking it onto the leather is the best thing to do. So I'm just going to flip this pattern over now. That's now ready for cutting out. The piece is now cut. I've got the seam allowance, the amount that I needed to add extra on the sides, and that piece is ready for the next stage. Now this piece here is going to get put onto something rigid. When you put leather on something rigid, whatever's underneath will be seen. So if that surface is got loads of imperfections, them imperfections will show through the leather. When I sew the seams, the seam allowance will be the same. It will be visible through the leather. It will raise it up at that point, and if the rest is glued down, you'll have a lip running all the way around the piece that is very visible. It's 3 times the thickness it should be. It'll be 3 times the thickness, or 2 times the thickness if you open the seam up. Now, leather can be thinned. With this piece, I want to thin the seams. Now that's called skiving. This is my skiving knife. It's a bladed one, so you buy a pack of blades, and that's the blade. It's not a very big blade. You can flip it round, so kind of use it twice, kind of thing. And it just slots in to a groove on the knife. Now when you skive anything, if you skive on an uneven surface, potentially you might put holes in the leather. anything underneath the leather will protrude and it will be a raised surface, so you will take that off more than the rest of the leather. So use a piece of glass, a very flat piece of wood. I use just a piece of chipboard that's got a laminate surface on it. So I'll get a new blade. So I've got a new blade in here now. I'm just going to start to skive the leather. Now with a brand new blade it will take off a nice clean cut. So when I skive these seams, I want to come a little bit on the inside of the leather. We start at the top. And there we go. And that's taken off a very fine amount. Now it depends how thin you want these, depends how far you go with it. So you can get it down to being paper thin, but just gently take it off. Don't try and do it all in one go, or else you'll end up going through. So that's about as thin as I want it. You can see that we've taken off quite a bit of leather there. As it goes lighter at the end here, it becomes very thin. That's absolutely fine now. So I'll do the same with this. Just work it down to being thin, and you don't need any pressure for this, just gently over the surface. As the blade gets a little bit duller, you can just go over it gently. So I'm going to take the majority off while the blade is new. So also get rid of your bits because they protrude as well. You can see what's protruded there. You just got to keep your eye on what you're doing with this. The last thing you want to do is cut a piece of leather, start to skive it, and then put a hole in it and have to cut it out again. Now skiving is easier on nice leather. If you cut anything from the belly and you try and skive it, you'll probably find it very hard. So another thing to consider when you choose where you're cutting from. The blade is starting to get a little bit blunt. So I'm just going to now go over these pieces and just take any unevenness off. You can sometimes end up with grooves where you've skived it away and you end up with a divot. So I'm just going over it just to kind of even out any potential divots. I'm going to flip the blade around. So I've used this part of the blade, I'm going to use the other half now. So that piece is now ready for sewing. Now before I can sew this piece, if you remember when I drew the pattern out, I put in the stitch lines. Well, the skiving process has removed those, so I'm going to have to put those back in. Now that I've actually sewn this together, I need to test fit it. Don't just assume that you've done everything right. Because of the inconsistency in the stretching leather, some areas stretch more than others, it's always best just to try it on, just to see how it looks. Also, you can work out whether you want the seam to be running this way, or you want to open it up. So I'll try it both ways, see which way I like best. And I think personally I like the seam to be running this way underneath. you've got to think about the item that you're covering. This is the tailgate, so when it's in situ it looks like that, and this is the bit that you will see. That's the hinge end, so it'll be closed like that and then open, and you'll be stood here. So you'll see this edge here first, so I'd rather the seam be going that way underneath. It's just less obvious. I want the seam on the top to run the same way as the seam on the bottom, both going inwards like that, and the seam that are here will run back in towards them both, so everything's even. Now I'm happy with that. So once you are happy, you have to think about gluing leather. You can use almost any glue to glue leather, even things like PVA, wallpaper paste, super glue, or typically what would be used on leather is contact adhesive. Now you can use a spray contact adhesive, you can use a brush on contact adhesive, doesn't matter, it will glue the leather the same. But the most important thing is not the leather, because leather is easy to glue. Like I said, it will glue with almost any glue out there, doesn't matter, it will glue leather. It's what you're gluing it to. Now some things are easier to glue than others, so you need to know what the surface is, what it's made of, and whether you can get a contact adhesive that will glue to it. Now a lot of plastics will have what the plastic is made from, but this doesn't. I suspect it's ABS, and ABS is okay to glue to. Not fantastic, but it's okay. But the surface needs preparing. I would sand this down, I would give it a wipe over with acetone. Acetone will get rid of any grease. This has come from a mould, and there's probably mould release on here. There might not be, but the chances are there is. So wiping over with something like acetone will just get rid of any debris, any grease, any release agents, anything that will inhibit the glue, to give the glue the best chance. A bit of a key as well. Contact adhesive, all contact adhesive, I've not come across one yet that can't be reactivated with heat. Whether you use a heat gun or a steamer, doesn't matter, the heat reactivates the glue and then gives you time to work with it. And to glue to a shape like this, what I do is I turn it inside out, I put it on the shape, and then I can apply glue. Now if you remember, the seams are going to get turned in, so I want to make sure I've got the seams turned in. So when I apply glue, I'll apply glue, turn the seams in, and then apply glue over the edge of the top seam of the uppermost seam allowance. So I'll come back to you once I've prepped this surface, and then we'll get on to gluing. That's the prep done on the door card. Now I'm not really going to talk about glues in this video because I have a 45-minute video out on spray contact adhesive. So if you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description to that one. You can go and watch that, and that'll explain glue a lot more. But this is just a standard eye heat spray contact adhesive, but I will leave a link in the description to where I get this glue from. Now it does come in 25 litre tins and 5 litre tins, so I need to apply glue to the seams first. So I just want to make sure that these seams are exactly where I want them to be. So the seams now are facing the way that I want them to face. I'm going to apply glue to the whole of the leather. I'm going to remove it, and then I'll apply glue to this part here. Now because I'm using a spray contact adhesive, I'm going to give it one coat, I'm going to leave it for a little while, and then give it another coat. Leather is quite fibrous and porous, so the glue will kind of seep into the leather. So once the glue's seeped in, the glue that goes on top will be more useful as glue. It'll be actually on the surface rather than embedded into the leather. When it comes to brushing, you don't necessarily need to do the same, just because you generally apply it thicker when you use a brush. When you spray, you can spray quite you can spray a little bit less. if you know what I mean. Now with rigid plastics, metals, anything that is non-porous, you only need one coat. When you actually buy a tin of glue, it'll tell you the amount of time that you need for the glue to go tacky before you apply the parts. I'm going to tell you a completely different way of doing it. So I'm going to walk away from this now, I'm going to go to the shop, get some lunch, come back, have lunch, sit around for a little while, maybe do something else, and then I'll come back to this. This, at that point, will be slightly tacky. You won't be able to put the pieces together and they bond. You have to apply pressure and heat. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm just going to go have some lunch. I'll come back to you after lunch. So it's probably been at least an hour since I applied glue to the leather and to the surface of this. Now a lot of you might think that's quite a long time, but as you can see, it's no longer tacky, and that's exactly what I want. For me to try and get this on here with tacky glue would be virtually impossible. It would be sticking like crazy, but if I put this on here, absolutely fine. I can manipulate it, I can get it into the correct position, and then I can worry about it actually bonding. So we have a weird shape. As you can see, this shape comes in here, so I have to start on this end. So that's something you have to think about when you're actually gluing leather to something. And I'm going to start by just finding the corners of this. I'm just going to put it there for now. I'm not going to put much pressure on it. The more pressure you apply to the leather, the more it's going to bond. That tacks into place, but I'm not completely sure whether it's in exactly the right place. So I need to double check things before I try and stick it down permanently. Flip this over, just have a see. I think that is in the correct position. I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure, not a lot, just a gentle rub. You probably can't see what I'm doing because obviously getting the camera where my head is not possible. Right, now I can put it over and I can start to put the rest in place. I'm going to have to kind of stretch this over the end here. Just slowly rolling it over. I'm just going to release this a little bit, just on the ends. It still will release. I'm just trying to get rid of any wrinkles and get this to lie as flat as possible. Don't want to stretch it too much at the minute. So you can see that I can still release it when I need to. Right, I can now work this back corner again now. Right, so that is on. You can see that there's lots of issues with it, but because it's not actually stuck properly, I can sort them out as I go along. Just manipulating the leather a little bit. So I need to put a little cut just here. So I've just slowly manipulated the leather. Now I've just sat that into position. I need to warm the glue up again. This corner's a little bit off, but because it's not been set, and the glue is still not really like glue, I can still manipulate it. So just pull it away a little bit and get that corner a little bit better. Better. So as you can see, because I've let the glue go off completely, I can still manipulate it, still remove it and then put it back on. The glue really hasn't started to do its stuff yet. I'm going to use two tools now, in fact three. One's my hands, one is a flat tool, and the other is steam. So I'm going to turn the steamer on. Now this can be done with a heat gun, but it is better with a steamer because a steamer acts more like an iron. You've got a physical heat plate to be able to push down on the leather and give it pressure. At this point I could probably give it loads of pressure and it'll stick, but a little bit of heat will just help. Now this is the flat tool that I'm going to use. It's just a scraper that I got from a hardware shop and reshaped it, and it's got no pointed end, it's not sharp in any way, it's nice and smooth on the edge, but it's flat enough just to push the leather in at the bottom here and have a nice crisp edge, and it being glued right in the recess here. I'm going to do that all the way around. A little bit harder just here because I'm not sure exactly where the edge is. So now the steamer's warming up, I'm just going to start along here and get this bit in and then work backwards. So that piece is on. Now the ends need to be trimmed. That's going to get done with a scalpel. I'm going to trim as close to the actual, you probably can't see, there's a tiny groove that I've put in with this, and that is my cut line. That's where I want to cut to. Leather's quite good because it can be marked with tools like this. You don't need pen, pencil. You can use a flat bladed tool or a pointed tool. Do exactly the same thing. It'll mark the surface of the leather and you can then cut to that line. So that's basically how you would glue something in leather that isn't a flat shape. Got these two pieces here. I would say this one here is about a quarter of a sphere, and I'm going to cover that in one piece. And this I'm going to cover in one piece as well. Now I've selected two pieces of leather. This one here is for this. It has some defects still on it, but the part I want is this part here. I've tested the stretch before I cut it out, and that's probably got the right amount of stretch. Now this part here, I've selected here, this is the belly, and if I pull on that belly, it instantly creates this shape. So I'm using the fact that we have this characteristic of the leather to cover this in one piece. Now I need to find out which way is the best way to lay it down, whether it's this way or that way, and then once I've done that, I'll be able to put that on. That'll be relatively easy. Believe it or not, you might think this needs patterning. I've seen it done where people put a seam in here and put a piece there, piece on top, piece at the side. This can be done in one piece. So onto this first. Now if you remember, I let this glue go off for ages and ages, just because I had to manipulate it over this shape, and I couldn't have done it if it was tacky. Now I need a little bit of tack when I'm working with this, because I want it to grab in places so I can stretch it. So I'm going to use a lot of force to stretch this around this sphere to be able to actually not have any wrinkles in it. But I will need steam as well. Now the steam makes the leather more supple. It gives it a little bit more stretch and allows me to manipulate it a lot more. This part here is where the most stretch is, and I want this to go in there. So I'm just going to place it down just there. That's my kind of high spot, and then I'm going to stretch it as much as I can. Just let it hold there for now. Now luckily I've got these two things here that will hide a lot of the excessive leather. So I'm manipulating it over and stretching everything now this way, but not working from the bottom, working from the top, because I want to be able to stretch this way and up at the same time. So just by doing that, you can see that it pulls it around. I'm not actually trying to work it in here, I'm trying to pull it this way. That now is not bad. I can now start to push in here. We'll need to put some relief cuts in. Don't want to put me too far. When you come to putting relief cuts in anything, you can always make them deeper, you can always add more. You can never remove them. So just a few in, just on the side that I'm working on. Now I'm pulling this down that way. I'm using the tool again. Oops. I'm going to cut off some of this excess. I don't need all this up here. I'm going to now work the opposite way, doing exactly the same. Pulling. Put some relief cuts in. And then I need to pull down here. So now I can see that potentially just need to extend these cuts a little bit. But I know exactly where I need to come to now, because I've got this groove, or this scratch put in. So now I need to get rid of all this here. And that's where the steam's going to come in handy. I'm just letting the steam warm the surface up. I'm not putting any pressure on it, I'm not even touching the leather, just letting it warm the surface. And I need to manipulate this leather into here. Put another relief cut in there. We have a gap here in the plastic, so I'm going to try and now manipulate everything into the relief cut. There. Bring that round and just put one just there. So I need to do the same on this side with the leather. Another relief cutting. So you see the scar that I've got that I chose to leave in, it's in a place that it probably won't be seen. So you can see here, I've got quite a lot of leather, but I can see where it needs cutting because of the creases. Pull it back out again. I'm just going to slide straight down there. Up there. Apply lots of steam to that area and pressure. I'm just going to do a bit of rough trimming. I'll trim the rest off later. So that's that piece in. All I need to do is to do some final trimming around the end and sort out all this. So now on for this shape. This shape is relatively easy. I'm going to leave the steamer on. Now if you remember, we had stretch. This is where the most of the stretch is here. So I want to make sure we've got enough there. And that's roughly where I want to put this. Just gonna push that down. I'm now gonna stretch this loads. Put relief cut in here, and one in there. That was just to check, make sure it fitted, and I'm gonna apply heat to the back of it and soften that leather. Leave it for a while now. I want it as supple as I can get it to get it round here in one piece. So on a part like this bit's seen, this bit isn't. Any wrinkles or abnormalities in the leather, I don't want on this side. I'd rather have on the side that's not seen. So that is kind of in, just there on the top. In there. Now there's excess leather running along here, so I need to pull the whole of this back. Again, I need it. Stretch it a little bit. And that'll form that in that one piece. Again, use the tool. And do the same with the underside. Trim some of the excess off. Don't need all this here. For this, I want to stretch this bit in here first, the top bit, and that'll pull the corners around. We have got radius corners, so if I try and do these, we'll end up with a pinch bit here. So I'm going to pull that as far back as I can. So that's three pretty complex shapes wrapped in leather. Now onto the lock area. I've cut three pieces, so I have a big one for the top and two small ones for the outside. Now I'm going to do exactly the same as I did with these two pieces. I'm going to mould it around here, the top bit, trim the bottoms off, and then put another piece in, mould it around, and then trim off here and kind of butt them together. So I'll spray these up, I'll spray this up, and then I'll start to apply the leather to here. Oh. I'm just manipulating the leather around these corners. I need to now stretch this back, so coming back towards me, and also outwards as I get to these corners here. Now I need to manipulate the leather and get it to go around these corners and lie flat against here without many wrinkles. So there's a lot of leather here, and the same on this side, so I need to kind of get rid of it. I'm going to leave the back part until I've done this side. I'm just trying to stretch this excess out here best I can. Now before I trim any of this excess off, I'm actually going to glue this under at the back. I want this to be as finished as possible when I come to actually know where I'm cutting on these edges here, where it comes off this lip. So the back end just finished off, and I need to trim the excess off here and here, and then I can start to apply both the other pieces. Now I'll probably need to apply a little bit more glue when I take this off here. It'll probably take a lot of the glue with it. So I've got a piece that's going to go into here, and I've applied glue to the edge of it, and the same around here. I'll let that go tacky, and then I'll put that on here. So I've cut this more than a 90-degree angle, so when I put it in here I can stretch this edge back in, which will then help me get the leather around this curve here, hopefully. Pull it back. So with the back, what I've done here is where I've cut the leather here at an angle, I've butted this piece of leather up to it. Now because this is a two-tone leather, you can see the discrepancy in the leather, but I can quite easily kind of blend that in. And put steamer on again now, and try and steam all this around this here. Very small things are often the most difficult. So you can see here the joint isn't too bad. Just need to get rid of any excess glue that's in that seam. Let's put a little relief cut in the back here. So this now is effectively, I wouldn't say done, but it's on. I need to now do all the trimming and then sort out these bits that just go inside here. So that is effectively covered. Right, I'll tell you where I'm at. I've cut the main body, I've skived the edges that I need to skive, done the fold on them, top stitched that fold, applied glue to the leather and to the door card. So again with this I'm going to wait quite a long time, maybe about an hour, let that glue go off properly. I may have to brush the very edges of some parts while I'm applying the leather. But I can do that as I'm going along. Now it's been just about enough time now. I'm going to place the leather onto here and just adjust it, get it into the correct position. Once I've done that, I'll just be able to steam it flat and that should be that done. Apart from tucking it around the back and finishing it off. So there we go, we're done. If you enjoyed that video and you learned something from it, hit that like button and I hope to see you again. Thanks for watching, bye.